It is really a privilege to be with you today and to come home. It's a real honor to be a part of your homecoming week here at Southern Virginia University. Coming home is actually what happens to us in our family when we come to Virginia. My wife and my daughter Kristen and her family are here with me today. I need that support. I'm grateful that they can be here to feel the spirit that you radiate, that you have present with you here at this university. Thank you for the invitation, brother, and I appreciate it very much. I did have the great privilege of serving here as a mission president for the church from 1971 to 1974. I realize that tells about my age, but that was a good age to be here. The mission at that time was headquartered in Roanoke, Virginia, not many miles from here, of course. Our family had just settled down at BYU. I had received an assignment there, opportunity to teach there, and we just got settled, just got a new home built, and thought, this is our home. We're going to be here forever. And then the telephone rang. I was in my office talking with a graduate student and trying to help with a project that he was working on, and I was separated from my secretary by a glass window. And the telephone rang, and she knew I was in council with the student, and looked over at me, and I looked over to her and take the phone. She said, and I said, I just tried to be careful and said, I can't do that right now. And she said, now, you take the phone. So I answered the phone a little bit begrudgingly, and hello, hello. This is Brother Haycock, the First Presidency's office. I was just wondering if you could meet with President Lee this afternoon at 2:30. I wondered, what in the world have I done? Something must have happened that I wasn't aware of. And I began to think, yeah, I'm sure we can be there. And I'm sure my wife was surprised when I came home in the middle of the day. Told her we had an appointment with President Lee, and I thought she must have the same apprehensions that I do. But we went to meet with him, and he was very kind to us and said, well, Brother Pinegar, the Lord has called you to serve as a mission president somewhere in the world. I was glad he put that in there. But I thought, okay, I can do that. I had not served as a missionary in my younger days. I'd been in the military. So I wondered if they had gotten the wrong man. I have a twin brother and several other brothers. And my twin brother had been a bishop. He'd been on a mission. He'd done all the things that I thought you had to do in order to be a missionary, and now let alone a mission president. And I had done none of those. We went, and he was, I say, was very kind to us. And we listened to that and said, would you be willing to accept this call? And of course we answered. And I say we, because it takes both of you. Yes. And I was wondering, and I started to look, my eyes strayed from him. I guess I didn't want to believe it, so I didn't look right in his eyes right then. And started looking around his room, and then he asked this question, do you have any questions? And I said, well, he had seen me looking at his rack of books in his office, and I said, what shall I take with me? And he reached across his desk. Excuse me. And he picked up his scriptures. He said, you take these, and you study these, and when you come back, you can write all of those if you want to. Because if there is any truth in them, it comes from here. Well, we came to Virginia. The first thing we learned was that our children were such an important part of this because they all came with us. We were young, and we had 5 children, 1 son and 4 daughters. Kristen was our youngest daughter. She was 4 years old at the time. So they all came with us, and I asked my children if they'd be willing to go with us on a mission. And my son said, yes, I guess so. And I thought, better find out what this is. And so a little while later, I thought he would come to me and talk to me about it, but since he'd said yes, I didn't want to press the issue, so I let it go. A little while later, we were talking, and I said, "You willing to go?" He said, "Yes," but he said, "I had wanted to be a little boy a little longer." He thought he was leaving all life behind, and he would have to wear a suit and shirt and tie, go from house to house. And I said, "Oh no, son, you're going there just as you are." And it gave him some relief, and certainly relief to me and to the rest of the family. When we came to Virginia, we learned something. We learned that Virginia is for lovers. We tried to not express that too much with our missionaries. We wanted them to understand what lovers meant, and so we found out it's for the lovers of history. It's for the lovers of Virginia ancestry. It's for the lovers of the great Virginia patriots of the past, lovers of their faith, their courage, their counsel. Thomas Stonewall Jackson, an admired Virginia general, said this: "You may be whatever you want to be." That places a lot of stress and pressure on you, doesn't it? You mean I'm really what I want to be? We're going to talk about that today. In a letter written to his nephew, George Washington counseled him this way: "A good moral character is the first essential in a man," and I would say in a woman as well. "And the habits contracted at your age are generally indelible, and your contact here at this university, for instance, may stamp your character throughout your life. It is therefore highly important that you should endeavor not only to be learned, but to be virtuous." Well, establishing a personal code of excellence in your treatment of others as well as yourself, catch that, yourself, is the foundation of true confidence. The key to feeling at home wherever you may be. By adopting his own rules of civility and conduct at age 16, George Washington developed a character and magnetism that made even his enemies feel drawn to him. He was well known for being amicable, personable, genuine. He was the leading figure in the world's crucial moments of history because of his tendency to come home to the values he subscribed to in his whole life. And what were they? Integrity, civility, humility, respect for God and man. George Washington's counsel to his nephew is relevant to us today. A pattern for feelings of security, comfort, well-being, and familiarity. Without a predetermined code of conduct and determined to follow the truths to come home to those values, no one, come home to those values. We can wander and dabble in distractions, suffer the stress of minute discussion making, and live with general uncomfortableness with ourselves and with others. As students of Southern Virginia University, I hope you feel a sense of privilege and blessing of being home, of coming home to this university home. It has been said that home is not where you live, but where they understand you. I'm grateful to this day for the two particular professors who helped me onto the right learning path, because they understood me and knew what I should and could do in my educational pursuits. I'll share a couple of examples with you. After completing high school, I, as you heard, went into the U.S. Navy. The Korean War was going on, and I spent 4 years there in the service. And then I followed that by entering BYU as a freshman. And I was a young freshman. I was only 23 years old. And while I was in the Navy, I had enjoyed working with what they called then number paintings. I don't know what you call them today. And I really enjoyed that because we had a lot of time at sea when we were just floating around. And so your thoughts could float around too, unless you engaged in something worthwhile. So we did number paintings. Let me tell you a little bit about that. I don't know how many of you have ever been in the service, but in the Navy, it's kind of interesting. If you're stationed aboard a ship, you have a lot of time. We had two men serving on our ship who were LDS boys, and ordinarily the ship's storekeeper would store a lot of alcoholic beverages for long times out. Well, these two young men found it difficult to buy alcohol, so they bought number paintings. So as soon as we ran out of alcohol, the people would come to the ship's store to buy something, and they'd say, "Well, I'm sorry, we don't have any, but we do have number paintings. You can paint by the..." Well, they didn't want to do that at first. But as time went on, more bought number paintings, till the skipper decided one day, we're going to have a display of your paintings. We'll evaluate and give prizes to those who've done the best. Well, some of these men had been at war and been into the battlefield, and they had kind of reluctantly done number paintings, and so they thought they were pretty good. But what did we do? They didn't put their names on them, but they displayed them on the flight deck. The flight deck of our carrier was almost covered with number paintings from these men. And I thought it was kind of interesting. My particular assignment had me in a position where I could look out on the flight deck. And as it got dusk time, you'd see certain men come up and they'd look around and look at the sky. Then they'd look down on the flight deck, and then they'd wander around and look at this painting and that painting, and then you'd see them stand by one painting a little bit longer than they did the others. Then I thought, I've got to go out here and see what they're looking at, and I did. And there were few with names on them, but there were numbers. Well, then you can imagine what happened. The skipper then began to make awards for these paintings. But then they had to identify themselves to get their painting back and to get the award. Some of these men were really what I would call hard nuts until it came to their own work. Then they decided, I think I can take credit for that. And they did. Well, it's important for us to understand that what we give attention to receives our best effort. And that's what they had discovered. Well, I was among those who really enjoyed number painting, but not being identified. But I thought when I went to BYU, I want to become an artist. So I enrolled in art classes. And I found out a very important thing. It takes more than interest and numbers to become an artist. You really have to have some talent. So reluctantly, I changed my major. And I decided I would go into education, elementary education, because I love to teach children. And then I discovered another thing. If you're going to take a degree of some kind like that, there's another thing you have to have. Brains. Not only that, you have to have good grades. I didn't have, well, I won't talk about my grades. And I was really very discouraged until I had a teacher who took some interest. He was teaching sociology, Dr. Bradford was, and I was in his sociology class, and he came over and we talked one day and found out he was from my hometown. And he said, "Rex, you must be on the honor roll." I said I should be, I guess, but I'm not. In fact, I'm not going to go there. And he said, "Why don't you come to my office and let me talk to you a little bit about that? You really should be on the honor roll." Well, it was an enticing invitation. So I went to his office, and he gave me a series of tests. And there were several of them, and I was really enjoying them. And I handed them back to him, and he said, "Well, come back in a few days, and I'll score them, and we'll see how you've done." So I came back, and he went over and said, "You have done amazingly well. You are in the top percentile in every test. You should be on the honor roll." I should? Yeah. So I decided I better study. I decided I'd better pay attention to what was being required of me. So I did, and pretty soon I was on the honor roll. Years later, I met that same professor, and I said, "What were those tests you gave me?" I assumed they were intelligence tests, of course. He said, "Oh, they were interest inventories. They were to find out what you had an interest in." I had an interest in everything, a very keen interest in everything. But his encouragement showed that he had an interest in me. He thought I could do better than I thought I could, and I did. I've always been grateful to Dr. Bradford. He really helped me achieve the education that I was desiring. Now let me tell you a story that he told me. When he was a young man, he went on a mission to Germany. It was at the same time that Hitler was coming to power. And often at night, the youth groups would gather in the public squares under the direction of military leaders and hold rallies to lure the other youth to join their movement. The mission president, of course, had warned all these missionaries, "Don't go near these rallies. Stay away, you either might get hurt or there might be trouble." Well, one evening, our professor, now a missionary, or then a missionary, his companion returning home to their apartment from a late appointment, and they heard the sounds of such a gathering in a nearby square. So they thought, well, it's right on our path home, and we'll just stay in the shadows and we'll go just kind of take a peek. Well, as they neared where the gathering was, they stepped into the shadow of a doorway, a recessed doorway. And they turned around, and just moments later, our teacher, missionary, found himself struck in the head by a rifle butt. Someone that had been there waiting. They'd noticed him. He went to the ground, and as he tried to get up, he got hit again and again. And then above all that din, he could hear these words, "Why are you here? Why are you here?" And he didn't have an answer, and he got struck again. Then he and his companion were put in restraining manacles and taken to a nearby police office. And the officer in charge there wanted to know why they were there. Why are you here? Why are you here in Germany? You are Americans. And they couldn't answer. So they put them in heavy manacles and put them in the cell, left them there till morning. When morning came, two other soldiers came and took them to the chief officer's office, and he asked them the same question. Why are you here? By now, our professor, who's been a missionary, had an answer. He said he decided that he would have to tell them no matter what the outcome, no matter what it cost. And so he said, we are here from America. To teach the people about the Lord Jesus Christ. Well, when the chief officer heard that, he said they could call their mission president, but they were to leave Germany immediately. Mission president came, took them away, and they left the country. When I learned this about Dr. Bradford, I could understand why he had asked the question of me, really, in giving me these tests. Why are you here? I came to understand that he was really interested in me. He wanted me to become better than I was. Well, I did accomplish those degrees, largely due to that kind of encouragement. Let me give you a second experience. Now, this may seem like a long way away from you, but it isn't. It's very close. Pretty soon someone will ask you what you're going to do. You're going to move on in your education. And you will, or you'll take jobs, or then eventually you'll say, I really need to know more than I know. So I began doctoral study at University of Southern California. And at the interview I had with the dean of the College of Education was very interesting to me. He was very kind. He was polite. He was what you'd expect him to be. He was a very well-educated and sensitive man. And we began looking at my graduate school record. As we did, he said, let's look at your grades. So we looked at my graduate school grades, and I was very pleased because I only had one C and one B, and all the rest were A's. And he said, and unexpectedly, Mr. Pinegar, do you know what this C tells me about you? And he put his finger with real authority on the top of that C. And I said, no, sir. He said, it tells me that you are capable of getting a C. In my mind, I was saying, what do the A's tell you? Come on, come on. What do the A's tell you? And before I could ask him what he meant by that, he was on to another subject, and we were talking about that. But that question kept bothering me. This tells me that you're capable of getting a C. Why? Why didn't he say, I can see you're capable of getting an A? Well, I don't know. And finally I thought of another statement that was made by a professor by the name of, or a philosopher by the name of Bainville. He was a Frenchman. And he said, we must want the consequences of what we want. It's not enough to want something. We must want the consequences such a desire will bring. And so I thought about that. We must want the consequences. So I decided I wanted the consequences of being in graduate school. I wanted to complete it, and so I did. And I found out that if you really want something, you must first analyze the consequences of such a desire. If you want to get better here, do you want those consequences? It may require greater study. It may require greater effort. It may require going to sleep at night. It may require you changing your habits. Are you willing to do that? Do you really want something? Look at the consequences. While I was serving in Virginia as a mission president, we used to receive about every 6 weeks several newly called missionaries to replace, of course, the missionaries that were going home. And in this particular group of missionaries, there was one missionary that just stood out. He was 6 feet, 11 inches tall. And I looked at him and I thought, boy, that's a really fine missionary. And he was an imposing character physically, but he just had that glow about him. I thought, who does the Lord want him to have as a companion? And I thought of a man, a missionary in a particular city, a larger city here in Virginia, and I thought that's where the Lord wants him to go, and we put him together. Now, the first 2 weeks, his letters were kind of just pablum, so to speak. We went here, we went there, we taught so and so and so and so on. Then the third week, I got this letter. Dear President, please send me a copy of the important rules. My companion says we don't have to keep all the rules, just the important ones. So would you please send me a copy of the important rules, because until you do, I intend to keep them all. Boy, I wanted to run across the state and grab that elder around the knees and just thank him. Just tell him how much I appreciated his effort. Well, you have to want something, you know the consequences. Keep the rules. Well, one day I was holding interviews with him and his companion and other elders, and I was talking to him about their apartment, and the missionary said to President, have you ever seen our apartment? I had to confess I hadn't seen it. He said, well, here's the problem. It's a loft apartment, and the ceiling slopes down right over the sink and the table. So whenever Elder Tall has to do the dishes or get food prepared, he has to kneel down. I had never known about this because I'd never heard any complaint. Give me the rules. I'll take the consequences. Elder Tall. Well, I decided he needed to transfer, so I transferred him to another city, and he and his new companion were out visiting a couple. Maybe you know how this is. If you've been a missionary or know something about missionary work, when you get moved into a new area, there usually are certain people that the missionaries have been teaching forever. The new missionary comes in, you need to come over and teach this family because they're just about ready to be baptized. Well, Elder Tall went with his companion to visit the family, and the wife had invited them over for the evening, and she'd give them dinner, and then after dinner they would present a lesson. So they went there, they had dinner, and when they finished, the father, who was the one the missionaries hoped to help, said, hey, elders, tell you what let's do. While my wife is cleaning up the table, come with me, we'll go outside and shoot a few baskets. Then when we get through shooting the baskets, we'll come in and you can give me this lesson that you've prepared. Elder Tall stood up, put his hand on the man's shoulder, said, sir, I would be happy to play you basketball, but we came here to deliver a more important message. But after I get off my mission, I'll come back and play you, and I'll beat you every time. And the man said, oh, it's all right, Elder. I think we should have the lesson. So they completed the lesson, and when the missionaries had gone, the man said to his wife, sweetheart, I think it's time for us to join the church. I have finally found someone to whom the gospel is more important than basketball. Why are you here? Why was Elder Tall on his mission? Well, this wasn't the only kind of experience Elder Tall had. He was one who had been an All-American. He'd had crowds stand and cheer him. He'd stood in the center of the floor and been honored. Why in the world was he on a mission where he had doors slammed in his face, people yelling uncomplimentary things? He was rejected, and he began thinking how different his life had been before he came on his mission. And he thought, I don't need this. I don't need to go out there and have dogs bark at me or have people ridicule me or belittle me or send me away. And then something happened. He began to think about why he was on his mission. And he discovered in his search of his mind and heart that he was not on the mission for Elder Tall. He was on the mission for the Lord. And he began to think about him, about how he had been taunted, how he had been ridiculed, how he had been beaten, even put to death in a torturous way. He said, I then realized that this mission was not for me. This mission was for the Lord. That changed his attitude. He said, I love my mission. I love being here. And he continued in a great way. I love Elder Tall. I love his attitude. I love his understanding that when we accept something to do, we need to give it our very, very best effort. We never know what we can accomplish if we do, or until we do. So establishing a personal code of excellence in your treatment of others as well as yourself. Remember that your good behavior is the best friend you have. You stand out as someone of character, or unless you just want to be a character, you can have character by being your very best. You can really feel at home wherever you go or wherever you may be because you feel comfortable with yourself. You're putting forth your own best effort. George Washington had some rules of civility. I'll just read some of them to you. He said, a good moral character is the first essential in a man or a woman. The habits contracted at your age are generally indelible, and your conduct here may stamp your character through life. It is therefore highly important that you should endeavor not only to be learned, but to be virtuous. Establishing a personal code of excellence in your treatment of others as well as yourself, listen to this, is the foundation of true confidence. It is the key to feeling at home wherever you may be. Well, this weekend is homecoming. How comfortable are you? If you're doing your best, you can really feel comfortable. If you're not doing your best, shape up. Do your best. You can do better. Oh, I have to share this experience. When I was in high school, I was a wrestling nut. I loved wrestling. But there was one fellow on our team that was better than I was, and we had the same weight. So the coach liked him a little, I thought. Liked him a little better than he did me. And so we were at a college having a wrestling tournament, and as they matched us up, we didn't have anybody in the 175-pound class. I weighed 160 pounds. So our coach said, Rex, we have to have somebody do it, so you take him. Yes, sir. And this fellow was really good, really, really good. I stood over in my corner. He was over in his corner. The coach, by the way, after leaving me there, had walked away from the mat. And we went to center, shook hands, went back to our corners, and the referee said, okay, go. So I came out of there kind of carefully. This man rushed at me with all he had. His toe caught in the covering of the mat. He fell down on the mat on his back, and I fell on top of him. It was over. I had won the match. I couldn't believe it. Neither could he. I got up and I was in a hurry to get over to my coach to tell him all about my success. As I approached him, I said, well, coach, I did it. He said, you mean he beat you already? It was only 2 minutes since he had left me. I said, coach, I won. You never saw such a change in your life as in that man's face. I found out you can do more than you think. And there is someone on your side when you're doing your best. It's you. You feel it. You know it. And you show it. Well, I just pray that this weekend may be a wonderful homecoming for all of you. That you'll renew your relationships with each other, the feelings of gratitude and love and honor for those who give their time to teach, to help and prepare you. I feel I've come home. I hope you feel that same way. I love you, Virginia. And I love Southern Virginia University. Go Knights, go.